G'day Blender heads, and welcome to this quick start guide for the Creature Kitbash add-on. Now, there's going to be several videos in this quick start guide. I'll make sure that there's links to all of those in the description below. But in this video, all we're going to be doing is installing the add-on and creating our first creature. So let's jump straight into that. So Creature Kitbash add-on installs basically the same as most Blender add-ons. All you need to do is go to Edit, Preferences, go to your Add-ons tab and click Install. Navigate to wherever you've got it installed. Double click on the latest version. Give it a brief moment to install because there's over 100 megabytes or so of different bits in this add-on. So it may just take a couple of seconds to install properly. There we go. And then all you have to do is click on this to enable it. Now, once you've installed it, just quickly jump down to your file paths. You should see a new line here open up. If you don't see that with the Creature Kitbash, that means that it hasn't finished installing properly. Now, that's okay. All we need to do is quickly close down Blender, restart it up. And if we go back to our preferences and on the file paths, this time if I scroll down, you should see the CKTB assets with the appropriate folder. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. That means that it's now installed properly and we're good to go. So first things first, let me enable my shortcuts. And if we go to Tools now, you can see that we have the Creature Kitbash add-on and our 4 buttons here. This is how you interact with the add-on, but the actual assets themselves come bundled into the asset browser. So let me just open up a new window here and choose the asset browser. If we go to our little current file drop down here, we can see that we've got these CKTB assets again. If you click on that, it will load in all of your assets. And let me just expand this over a little bit. And you can see here are all the assets that come bundled with the pack. Now, you may notice that there's a couple of additional assets in here that you may not have yet, like, for example, this Tiger base mesh. These are all a bunch of free assets, an additional pack provided by George Zaki, who creates base meshes, and he has very generously offered to give us all of the free base meshes that he provides on his Gumroad page to come bundled with the Creature Kitbash, and that's almost doubled the number of assets in here, which is really amazing. If you want to look at specifically just his pack, if you type in GZ into the search bar, you'll notice that all of his assets have the GZ suffix at the end. And you can see that these are all the assets that he has provided, which, as I say, has nearly doubled the number of assets here. So that's really cool. All right, so before we create anything, let's just briefly talk about the assets themselves. So I'm just going to look up male here, and I'm going to add the male base mesh. Now, to get the assets into your scene, generally speaking, if you've got the asset browser, you drag and drop. Now, that functionality still works. We want to maintain the original functionality of the asset browser, but this will not work with the add-on. So I'm just going to undo that. I'll delete him and get rid of him. So to actually make it work with the Creature Kitbash, we want to use this Add Part button. And you can see now that that comes in without that little empty object. It's not coming in as an instance, so now we can actually like mash these together, whereas if you just do the drag and drop, that functionality doesn't work. So make sure that you're using the add part. All right, so the actual meshes themselves, as you can see, this is a complete base mesh of a male. I'm just going to go and turn wireframe on here. You can see that this is all quad topology, all done up very nicely. There may be a couple of tries in there, but the vast majority of it is quad. And just as an added bonus, if we go over to the UV editor and open this up, you can see that everything, all of these assets have also been lovingly UV unwrapped. So if you just want to use these base meshes as they are ready to be rigged and textured and animated and added into your scenes as is. Another little bonus, let me just go back to the asset browser here. Let me delete him, and let's bring in the male head, and just for fun, let's go and bring in the bear. Let's bring in the torso. And if I grab both of these now and go back to the UV editor, you can see that we've tried our best to make sure that even between different assets, the UVs don't overlap. So you can see up here, this here is the human head, and then the rest of it is the bear torso. Obviously, we're dealing with some very dramatically different creatures here. Sometimes you will get a little bit of overlap there, but for the most part, it should be very, very simple to just maybe tweak the UVs a little bit, and you'll have a perfect UV map. Now, it does need to be said that all of these assets have been created to be mashed together, and in the process of mashing them, booleans, remeshing, the UVs can get destroyed in that process. So there's a good chance that you will still need to do some retopology and some re-UVing, but we've made them in such a way to try and make it as easy as possible to maintain the UVs. All right, that's enough about the assets themselves. Let's actually make something already. Okay, so let's jump back to the asset browser. I'm just going to select all of these, delete everything, and I'm going to make a centaur. Let's make a centaur. So let's go back to the male parts, and I'm going to add the male torso. Now, something that does need to be mentioned here is that by default, the use mirror is on. That will obviously mirror your body parts. But with the first asset that you put down, we're kind of expecting you put down a torso or a head or something that's kind of got a center line. So the very first object that you put down, it doesn't matter whether the mirror is selected, it doesn't mirror it. Okay, so you can see that if I go here and move this around, there's no mirroring. On the other hand, if I now say go and add the arm and go add part, you can see that the mirroring is in fact working as expected. So let's go and add a few more parts. I'll disable the mirror to add the head. Just make sure that is in the right plane. Let's grab all of those things and move them up a little bit, because now we're going to add the horse parts. You can see here that George Zaki has provided his own kind of more cartoony sort of horse. I'm going to use the horse that we built because it's a little bit more on the realistic side of things. So we've got the horse torso. Let's go and add that part. And let's shift these back over here. Horse torso is a little bit big. So just using your regular blender tools, you can scale this down a little bit and move all of these kind of roughly into place. Horses should probably have a tail, so I will go and add his tail back in. And I think I just want to move this down a little bit so that intersects slightly better. I kind of want to get this the arch of the back of the horse going up into the arch of the human upper torso. Okay, so this is pretty close, but you can see, yeah, we've still got some stuff that's kind of not lining up very well. So in this instance, before I go in and try and join anything, I just quickly like to jump into sculpt mode. Let's just make sure that our symmetry is turned on. And I'm just going to shuffle some of these bits into place a little bit. And you don't have to be too clean with this, because we are going to smash these bits together in a moment. And we can always fix it after the fact. But just getting it a little bit cleaner can help with the booleaning process. So that's not too bad. I might just expand the horse as well and make sure that symmetry is on for each object. So let's just expand that neck a little bit. So that's a little bit stronger going up into the torso there. All right, I think that's looking good. Okay, so to actually join objects here, we've got two options. We can either use the union, which is a Boolean process, or we can use the join, which taps into the sculpting remesh option. To start with, I'm going to show you the Boolean tools. So I'm just going to give myself a little bit more space here. Let's shuffle that across. I'm just going to go through and select all the different meshes. So the tail, torso, the arms, head, and body. Now, take note here that some of these assets, like the head, do come with eyes. And in fact, if I just go and hide this, you see that it also comes with a set of teeth, and there's even a tongue hidden away in there. And certain assets will have eyes, teeth, some of them have claws. You may or may not want to join these assets. So just be aware that if you select all and use this, it will join even the eyeballs into the skull itself, which is, in this case, is not what we want. For something like the claws, maybe, but in this case, I want to keep the eyes and the mouth separate. So again, I'll just select all of these bits, select the horse torso, and go union. Give it a brief moment because it's running through some Boolean operations, and you can see now that this is all one mesh. It's a little hard to see from the outside, so if we just kind of duck into his torso here, you can see that it's punched a hole all the way up into his upper chest, and this is all now one mesh. So if I grab this, you can see that everything moves all at once. It has given us some slightly dodgy geometry. That, unfortunately, is just a side effect of using booleans. So at this point, I always like to just give the model a quick look over and make sure that everything has worked. So kind of like how we ducked into there before and went, yes, the torso is joined. Duck in here and go, yes, the arms look like they've all joined. Turn around and look up into the head. That's worked. And if we look down there, you can see that the tail has also joined, although it has given us some slightly dodgy geometry there, which, again, a side effect of Booleans. There's not too much that we can do about that. So in terms of getting this thing ready to sculpt on, look, it's kind of already there, but some of these shapes here, where the wire mesh kind of makes n-gons, is not great to sculpt on. You can see even in the viewport here, we've got some weird jaggedy edges, and as I brush over it, some of them can sometimes get worse. So what I like to do is quickly turn on Dyn Topo. You can use the Control-D shortcut or just turn it on here. Now I really don't like the relative detail. I'm going to change mine to constant. Just use the eyedropper tool and select somewhere around here. It's giving us 40 voxels of resolution. I'm just going to up that a little bit. I'm going to take mine to 60. I'm just going to lightly brush over these areas, and you can see that it completely recreates the topology there. Now you can do that with most of the brushes, but all of them will kind of shift the geometry a little bit. So you can also just use this simplify button here. And if I draw over, say, the arms, you can see that it rebuilds this topology without moving anything, which is kind of nice. And then I can just come in with a smooth and just smooth out some of that more jagged geometry and smooth this back up into the back here. Do this around the neck. And we had some strange stuff going on around the tail. Let's just rebuild that and smooth that out as well. Now if we go back into object mode, turn that off, and if I go and smooth shade it, you can see that for the most part we've got some much better geometry here with not nearly as many strange defects. So this fellow now would be ready to start sculpting on. So that's how the Booleans or the union button works. Let's talk about doing the remesh. Now I have found more and more frequently that I'm using the union button because I find that it retains the details like the face or the fingers of your mesh considerably better than using the remesh. You lose a lot of detail with the remesh. On the other hand, Booleans do have a greater tendency to break, and we have a whole extra video in the Quick Start Guide dedicated to talking about how to debug those kind of issues, so hopefully you won't have them. But there are occasions where it is easier, or sometimes even just not possible, using the Booleans, and it's much faster to just use the remesh. So let's talk about remeshing. Let's start by deleting our little centaur character here. Goodbye. And let's create some sort of like little weird cat demon creature, because, you know, everybody likes cats, right? So we've got two different cats in here. One is George Zaki's again. He has a more cartoony style one. I'm going to use the slightly more realistic one in this case. So let's start by adding a cat torso. Let's go and add that part. All of these meshes are scaled kind of appropriately. So you can see here the cat is considerably smaller than the human characters. So let's zoom in on the cat here. Let's go and give it a head. I might just shift that across a little bit. I'll just turn my viewport displays back on so we can see what we're doing a little bit better. And now let's go and add some wings. We've got a couple of different choices here: bat wings, bird wings, and a gargoyle set provided by George. I'm going to use the bat wings. Let's turn on the use mirror and go and add those. These do come in fairly large. Let's shrink them down a little bit. Just fold them back. Now the wings are one of those pieces that comes as two parts. So you can see you've got the membrane here, which again, you may or may not want to mesh into your base mesh. You may want to keep that separate because it's a little bit easier for rigging purposes. Leave that up to you. So let's go and give it a tail. In fact, this is a good opportunity. So you don't just have to use all of the assets that come as part of the Creature Kitbash. You can use any objects in this process. So I'm going to do something cool here. I'm going to go and give him a snake head on the back of a tail. So let's just go and add the snake head. We'll shrink it down so it's a little bit more appropriate. Now, we do have a whole bunch of different tails in here. I could probably find one of these that I could spin around and it would work appropriately, but just to demonstrate this, let's go and use a UV sphere in this case. You could use a cylinder or a sphere, but I'm going to use a sphere. We'll scale this down, stick this kind of roughly where its tail would be, go into sculpt mode. Again, let's just make sure that we have symmetry turned on, and let's just kind of start dragging this out. Now this is a little bit low poly, but we can kind of make something work here. Use the inflate tool just to fatten that up. And join that into there. So once again, let's select all of our parts, our kind of fake tail here, the snake head, making sure not to select the eyes or the tongue. Select just the wings. I'm going to leave the membrane separate, the head and the torso. Let's bring up our Creature Kitbash buttons again and press the join button. And you can see that this drops us straight into sculpt mode. Now, before you start sculpting, take note that in this case, this doesn't actually join the objects just yet. This has just made them one mesh and put us into sculpt mode. So if I go on the inside here of the chest, you can see those there are the wings poking through. This here is the bottom of the neck. This isn't one mesh yet. So the whole idea here is that before we use Dyn Topo, now we want to use the remesh. And the only reason that we don't automatically just remesh it for you is because remeshing can be a little bit tricky. It all depends on your voxel size, and the voxel size depends on the size of your character. So we didn't want to accidentally throw too many voxels at it and crash your computer. So you do have to kind of go through and do this manually. Generally speaking, go and grab the eyedropper, choose an area that's fairly dense. So I reckon the wings here are the densest spot. You can see that's going to drop it to 0.01. And you know what, let's roll with that. Let's see whether that's enough density. So you can use the remesh button here. Other alternatives, you can also use Shift R. And if I just get this in the right spot, this is also your voxel density, so you can actually see how dense this is going to be. And in fact, I reckon I want to push that a little bit further. So I'm going to go like 0.005 or thereabouts. Just be wary with this. The lower you go, the longer it takes, the more likely it is to crash. So, you know, be careful. Then from there, you can either press remesh or Control R. So I'm going to press Control R. And you can see that that is now quite quickly actually remeshed everything. You will also notice that we lost a little bit of detail here. So the eye sockets are kind of gone. The mouth is gone. The mouth from the snake is also gone. So if I undo that, you can just undo it and go and find a lower voxel size and see whether that works. And you can see that this is now taking considerably longer and gives us a very dense mesh. But now we have managed to retain most of those details. So another alternative is you can combine these two things. So this is all one mesh at the moment. Let me just undo it a couple of steps until it's all separate meshes again. So if you want to, you can both union and remesh. So let's just say that the head is something that I want to really retain that detail on. So I can just use union, and then that will boolean those parts. I can then do the same with the snake head and go union. And these are now separate meshes. So I can grab all of those, and if I just wanted to remesh these now, I can go and use the join button and I can now remesh these separately. And you can see here that the wing membrane here is kind of broken. When it meshes these objects together, it renames some of the objects. And if it's renamed the wrong one, sometimes your mirrors will break. It's pretty easy. Just come in here, select your mirror object, and click on the new base mesh that it's created, and that will then mirror appropriately. And the last thing that's probably worth mentioning is, don't think that just because you've kind of made a creature that's it. You can come in and add more parts to this. So this is all one mesh at the moment. So what else do we want to add to this guy? You know what? Let's give him some bird talons. Let's replace one of the legs here, because that'll give me an opportunity to show off 2 extra things. So a little known tool under sculpt mode, which I don't see a lot of people using, is this box trim, and it also has the lasso trim. So you can use this to very quickly lop off parts that you no longer want. So let's say that we want to replace the back legs, okay? So I've got this lasso tool selected. I'm just going to draw a selection around the back legs here. Give that a brief moment. And there you go. The back legs are just gone. We don't need these claws anymore, so I'm going to delete those. I'll turn on the mirror with the bird talon selected and go add part. These come in quite small, so let's scale them up until it touches and just shift them around a little bit. I'll just jump into sculpt mode and just kind of push these into place a little bit more. This will require a little bit of stretching. And this might actually be a little easier to manipulate after we've joined them, just because these talons are fairly low poly. Okay, now this one could be a little bit interesting, because this geometry that we've trimmed out of the cat body here, this is the sort of stuff that is more likely to break booleans. So let's give this a try and let's just see if it works. And if it doesn't work, I'll show you how you can go about fixing that. So let's select these and let's go union. And you can see that cat body has just disappeared. This is an example where it hasn't worked. So let's undo. I can quickly show you how to fix this. So I'm just going to isolate this by pressing the slash key. All of this under here is really bad geometry, and booleans can have a tendency to break with these. This is why we've tried to make as many of these meshes quad topology as possible. So fastest way to at least try and fix this is to turn on Dyn Topo, and I'm just going to draw over this area, and I think I've disabled symmetry at some point. Let's just make sure that that is on. Redraw over that, and you can see that it's not quad topology, but it's significantly better than what it was. So I'm just going to add a little bit of mass here, so we've got something for these talons to kind of latch onto. And in fact, we may be having some other issues here, because I don't think I joined some of these meshes properly. Actually, don't look too bad. Where didn't I? Well, maybe I did. Okay, I take it back. Those look good. Now the talons as well. I'm actually just going to go and add a subdivision modifier to this and just quickly apply that, just so we've got a little bit more mesh to play with here. And now I can try and join these a little bit better. And I need to turn symmetry off here because we're using a already mirrored object. I can kind of do some funny things. All right, those are now inside the body. Hopefully this will now work. If I go union, boom, there you go. Those are joined. Just go into Dyn Topo, quickly rebuild some of this. I feel like we might need a slightly higher resolution in this case. So I'm going to pick this up to about 100. There you go. Smooth that out. Let's just join this tail in a little bit better as well. And smooth shade that. We've got some defects or artifacts over here. So I'll just once again kind of quickly draw over that neck. where it hasn't connected properly. Maybe do the same thing around the wings. And smooth shade. And now you can see we've got some sort of weird chicken, cat, demon monster thing ready to be sculpted on. All right, hopefully that's been a really good introduction, and I'll see you in the next quick start guide.